The hidden trait that makes you psychologically untouchable. Machiavelli's secrets is CINI, TILOSIOFVL Nenrabaluty. There are people who live inside a storm and never get wet. No insult penetrates them. No manipulation changes their direction. No public attack destabilizes their inner world. You can watch them being shredded by a crowd and they will not flinch. You can watch them being mocked, humiliated, or betrayed, and they will not react. You can watch their reputation collapse in real time, and they will not scramble to defend it. Meanwhile, everyone else behaves like a fragile glass. A single word cracks them. A single accusation fractures them. A single attack makes them stumble, apologize, explain, beg, or disappear. The world has trained us to believe that psychological strength is born from power, from confidence, from dominance, from intelligence, from moral superiority. But the truth is more unsettling, because the people who appear strongest are often the most fragile. They are the ones who need to be seen, the ones who need to be praised, the ones who need to be validated. And the moment the validation stops, they crumble. The people who are truly untouchable do not rely on strength, they rely on something far stranger. The moment you realize this, the world becomes a different place. You start to see the invisible architecture behind every social interaction. The way people are shaped by approval, the way they are controlled by attention, the way they are pushed into defending themselves again and again until they become predictable. Most of us are not broken by enemies. We are broken by our own need to be understood. We are broken by the fear of being seen as wrong. We are broken by the fear of being rejected. We are broken by the fear of losing our identity in the eyes of others. And so we react, we explain, we defend, we justify, we perform, we reveal our inner world, our emotions, our fears, our vulnerabilities, and we hand them over like currency. This is the real reason we can be manipulated, not because we are weak, but because we are exposed, we are open, and the world is full of people who know exactly where to strike. The moment you show your need, your longing, your insecurity, you become a map others can follow, a map others can use. And this is where Machiavelli enters the picture, not as a villain, not as a ruthless tyrant, but as a surgeon, a man who dissected human behavior and revealed what most people refuse to admit. Machiavelli didn't write about cruelty because he loved it. He wrote about it because he recognized how easily people could be controlled, not through swords or armies, through the most ancient form of power, emotional exposure. Because he understood something that still frightens us today. The strongest people are not those who can win every fight. The strongest people are those who refuse to enter the fight. The people who are psychologically untouchable are not invincible. They are simply unreachable. They do not invite others into their minds. They do not hand out access. They do not show their inner world. They do not react. They do not defend. They do not prove. And that is why no insult reaches them. No manipulation alters their direction. No public attack destabilizes their inner world. The common belief is that strength is loud, that strength is visible, that strength is a display. But the truth is the opposite. True invulnerability is silent, it is private, it is hidden, and it begins with a terrifying question. What if the ability to be emotionally hurt has nothing to do with strength at all? What if it is simply the price we pay for needing to be seen? In the next moments, the documentary will reveal the one hidden trait that keeps others from entering your psychological territory, and why most people are unknowingly trained to lack it. Because the world does not just punish weakness, it rewards exposure. Citons to Machiavelli's Dangerous or BSR Vanon, word count 670. Machiavelli was not a prophet. He was not a mystic. He was not a poet who painted human nature in beautiful colors. He was a political surgeon. He watched the world not as a moral lesson, but as a laboratory, and he saw a truth that most people refuse to accept. Power does not attack strength. Power attacks attachment. It attacks the part of you that wants to be seen, the part of you that wants to be praised, the part of you that wants to be respected, the part of you that needs approval to feel alive. In Machiavelli's time, the stakes were simple: kings, princes, generals, nobles. The world was a stage of survival, and everyone understood the rules. But what Machiavelli saw beneath the surface was something more disturbing. He saw that the people who fell were not the weak. They were the attached. They were the ones who needed their reputation to be perfect. They were the ones who needed moral approval to feel safe. They were the ones who needed to be loved, respected, admired. They were the ones who couldn't tolerate the thought of being seen as flawed, and so they became predictable. And predictability is the first step toward control. When you need validation, you become readable. When you need approval, you become manipulable. When you need to be seen as good, you become exploitable. Machiavelli's warning was brutal, but not cruel. It was clinical. He understood that power does not break people by force alone. It breaks them by making them react. It breaks them by making them defend. It breaks them by forcing them to show their inner world. And once the inner world is visible, the mind becomes a battlefield. Consider the political rival whose entire life was built on being seen as virtuous. A single accusation, true or false, is enough to topple him. Consider the nobleman who built his identity on reputation. Once his reputation is threatened, he will do anything to defend it. He will apologize. He will beg. He will betray others to protect himself. He will lose his soul trying to protect his image. And the attacker doesn't even need to be powerful. They only need to be skilled at pulling strings. Because the exposed mind is already defeated, Machiavelli didn't just observe this in history. He understood it as a fundamental law of human behavior. He understood that people are not controlled because they are weak. They are controlled because they are emotionally readable, because they are transparent, because they broadcast their fears, their desires, their attachments, and their need to be understood. And power doesn't attack the strongest. It attacks the one who needs to be right, the one who needs to be loved, the one who needs to be praised, the one who needs to be seen. Power targets attachment. It targets the human need for approval, and it uses that need as a lever. It knows exactly where to press. And the more you care about what people think, the more power others have over you. This is Machiavelli's dangerous observation. The most powerful weapon is not the sword. It is the ability to make someone react. It is the ability to force someone to reveal their inner world. It is the ability to control the narrative inside their mind. Because when you control the narrative, you control the person. This is why Machiavelli's lesson is not about aggression. It is about opacity. The people who are hardest to influence are not loud, righteous, or reactive. They are quiet. They are private. They are unreachable. They are not trying to win. They are not trying to be seen. They are not trying to be understood. They simply exist, and that existence is their defense. In modern society, Machiavelli's lesson has been inverted. Instead of protecting our inner world, we are taught to externalize it. We are trained to broadcast our beliefs, our emotions, our vulnerabilities, our identities. We are taught to prove ourselves constantly. We are taught to defend ourselves publicly. We are taught to seek validation in the crowd, and in doing so, we become easy targets. Because when you expose your inner world, you invite the world to control it. Machiavelli did not write to teach cruelty. He wrote to expose a weakness most people are still unaware they possess, the weakness of attachment. And the documentary now begins to reveal the hidden trait that neutralizes this weakness, the trait that makes a mind unseeable, untouchable, unreachable, SCTU. TPSY show lojro moi off control word count 750. Human beings like to believe they are free. They like to believe they think independently. They like to believe they are immune to manipulation. But the truth is far more disturbing. Most people are not controlled through force. They are controlled through emotional hooks. Manipulation is not a physical attack. It is a psychological bait. And it works because humans are not primarily rational creatures. Humans are meaning-seeking creatures. We don't just react to events. We react to what those events say about us. We react to what those events do to our identity. Because identity is the most fragile thing we possess. It is the story we tell ourselves, the story we need to believe to feel stable. When that story is threatened, the mind does not analyze, it defends. It reacts. It fights. This is the true anatomy of control, not coercion, not intimidation, but identity attack. When someone threatens what you identify with, your beliefs, your values, your moral labels, your political identity, your self-image, your rational brain collapses. Your defense mechanisms activate. Your emotional brain takes over, and suddenly you are no longer thinking. You are reacting. You are defending. You are proving, you are winning. And that is exactly what the manipulator wants. Because the moment you react, you become predictable. The moment you defend, you reveal your weakness. The moment you prove, you expose your attachment. The moment you fight, you show your need. This is why propaganda works. Not because it convinces people with facts, but because it attacks identity. It creates a story that makes people feel seen. It gives them a label. It gives them a tribe. It gives them a purpose. And once people have that label, they will defend it at any cost. They will defend it against evidence. They will defend it against logic. They will defend it against their own self-interest, because their identity has been tied to the story. And when the story is threatened, they feel threatened. This is why social media is a weapon. It is not just a platform for sharing. It is a machine for emotional reaction. It is designed to provoke, to divide, to polarize, to make people feel that they must respond, because the algorithm rewards outrage, and outrage is the sound of identity being defended. The modern world is built on this mechanism. Entire populations are kept emotionally reactive, divided, predictable, controlled. They are not controlled by laws. They are controlled by feelings. They are controlled by their need to be right. They are controlled by their need to be morally superior. They are controlled by their need to be seen as good. And the most chilling part is that most people believe they are independent thinkers precisely because they react emotionally to ideas. They mistake reaction for freedom. They mistake outrage for intelligence. They mistake aggression for conviction. But emotional reaction is not independence. It is exposure. It is the moment your inner world becomes visible. It is the moment your mind becomes a map. It is the moment you can be manipulated. Because when you are emotionally reactive, you are not analyzing. You are not strategizing. You are not thinking. You are simply defending. And that defense is the key. This is why the more passionately someone argues, the more vulnerable they are. Because passion is attachment. Passion is need. Passion is exposure. When you argue passionately, you reveal what you cannot tolerate losing. You reveal the point of identity you are willing to die for. You reveal the weakness in your mind. And power targets that weakness. Not because power is evil, but because power is practical. Power does not need to destroy you. It only needs to make you predictable. It only needs to make you reactive. It only needs to keep you emotionally exposed. And once you are emotionally exposed, you can be guided, shaped, and controlled. This is the true anatomy of control. Not the sword, not the threat, not the force, but the hook, the emotional hook, the identity hook, the self-defense hook. And it is everywhere, in politics, in media, in religion, in social movements, in relationships, In every conversation where someone tries to make you prove who you are, the more you prove, the more you reveal. The more you reveal, the more vulnerable you become. And the more vulnerable you become, the easier it is for others to control you. And SXTOIV, teach he the enter diver word count 760. The truth is rarely dramatic. The truth is often silent. The hidden trait that makes someone psychologically untouchable is not courage. It is not dominance. It is not intelligence. It is not even confidence. It is internal detachment, not emotional numbness, not apathy, not moral emptiness. Internal detachment is the ability to observe without identifying, to feel without fusing, to experience without anchoring. Most people confuse detachment with indifference. They assume that someone who doesn't react must not care. But that is not detachment. That is a misunderstanding. Because the psychologically untouchable do not lack emotion. They simply do not build their identity on emotion. They do not allow their sense of self to be defined by their beliefs, their values, their opinions, or their moral standing. They experience emotions like weather. They see them. They acknowledge them. They do not deny them, but they also do not mistake them for who they are. This is the crucial difference. Most people use emotion and immediately think, this is who I am. I am angry, I am offended, I am ashamed, I am superior, I am right. And in that moment, the emotion becomes a prison. Because once you believe the emotion is your identity, you must defend it. You must justify it. You must prove it. You must protect it. And that protection becomes a leash. It makes you predictable. It makes you manipulable. Internal detachment is the opposite. It allows emotions to exist without controlling the mind. It allows thoughts to appear without becoming reality. It allows beliefs to be held without becoming a cage. And that is why attacks cannot penetrate, because insults find no surface, manipulation finds no leverage. The mind remains unreachable. Machiavelli understood this intuitively. The ruler who does not need to be loved, admired, or morally validated cannot be controlled, because the moment you need love, admiration, or moral validation, you are attached. And attachment is the point of entry. This does not apply only to rulers. It applies to anyone navigating social systems, institutions, and power dynamics. It applies to anyone who has ever felt the pressure to be seen as good, right, or respected. It applies to anyone who has ever been forced to defend their identity. The psychologically untouchable are not immune to pain. They simply refuse to make pain their identity. They are not immune to insult. They simply refuse to give insult meaning. They are not immune to betrayal. They simply refuse to let betrayal define their worth. Detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of attachment. This is where the concept becomes unsettling, because most people are not taught to observe without identifying. Most people are taught the opposite. They are taught to identify with their thoughts. They are taught to identify with their beliefs. They are taught to identify with their social roles. They are taught to identify with their reputation. They are taught to identify with their moral image. And once you identify with these things, you become a target, because identity is the easiest lever to pull. But detachment is not repression. This is a crucial distinction. Repression is denial. Repression is hiding emotions in the dark. Repression is pretending they do not exist. Repression creates a pressure that eventually explodes. It is not strength, it is fragility. Detachment is awareness without fusion. It is seeing emotions clearly and letting them pass. It is not denial. It is not avoidance. It is not suppression. It is clarity. It is calm. It is freedom. And that freedom is what makes the mind untouchable. Because the untouchable mind is not a closed door. It is a door that does not respond to knocks. It does not open because it does not recognize the need. It does not open because it does not crave approval. It does not open because it does not fear rejection. It does not open because it does not require validation, and the world, built on validation, cannot break it. This is why detachment feels rare in daily life, because daily life trains people to broadcast their inner world, to share their beliefs, their emotions, their identity, to prove themselves, to argue, to defend, to be seen. The untouchable mind does the opposite. It keeps its inner world private, not because it is secretive, but because it is safe, because it understands the value of invisibility. The trait is not about being above emotion. It is about being below manipulation. And this is the moment the documentary becomes surgical, the moment the audience realizes that the hidden trait is not a superpower, it is a skill, a discipline, a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of existing without giving others access to the inner world. This is the hidden trait, internal detachment without indifference, the ability to observe without identifying, the ability to feel without being owned, the ability to exist without being controlled. SC Tion V. So CEIRIs NIUAUTOB tably word count 782. Modern society does not suppress emotion. It cultivates it. It does not discourage exposure. It rewards it. From the moment people enter public life, through education, media, politics, and digital platforms, they are taught a single lesson, repeated endlessly in different forms. Define yourself. Declare yourself. Defend yourself. Identity is no longer something private. It is something to be displayed. Beliefs are no longer something to contemplate. They are something to announce. Emotions are no longer something to process internally. They are something to perform. And this shift is not accidental. Emotionally exposed individuals are easier to predict, easier to categorize, easier to control. A person who reacts loudly reveals where they can be touched. A person who declares their identity reveals what must be threatened. A person who broadcasts their beliefs reveals which levers will move them. This is why outrage has become the dominant emotional currency of the modern world. Outrage keeps attention locked. Outrage collapses nuance. Outrage bypasses reflection. Outrage forces immediate reaction, and reaction is profitable. Digital platforms are built around engagement, not understanding. Engagement thrives on emotion. The stronger the emotion, the longer the attention. The longer the attention, the more predictable the behavior. Predictability is power. This is why people are encouraged to react instantly. Why silence is framed as weakness. Why restraint is interpreted as complicity. Why emotional distance is treated as moral failure. A person who does not react cannot be easily categorized. A person who does not perform outrage cannot be easily mobilized. A person who does not expose their inner world cannot be easily mapped. And mapping is everything. Modern systems do not need to silence individuals. They only need to understand them. Once a person's emotional triggers are known, opposition becomes unnecessary. Their reactions can be anticipated. Their outrage can be provoked. Their attention can be redirected. Their energy can be exhausted. This is the paradox most people never notice. They believe self-expression makes them powerful. They believe visibility makes them influential. They believe being seen makes them matter. But visibility is vulnerability. What is seen can be targeted. What is defined can be attacked. What is declared can be inverted. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, not in terms of technology, but in terms of psychology. What is visible is vulnerable. What is exposed invites interference. What is attached invites manipulation. Modern society has inverted this lesson. Instead of teaching people to guard their inner world, it trains them to externalize it. Instead of teaching emotional discipline, it rewards emotional display. Instead of valuing restraint, it glorifies reaction. And those who resist this training are often misunderstood. They are labeled cold, detached, uncaring, suspicious, but in reality, they are simply unreadable. And unreadability is dangerous to systems built on prediction. Consider how quickly identities are now formed. Political identities, moral identities, cultural identities, psychological identities. People are encouraged to reduce themselves to positions, to be known by where they stand. Once reduced, they can be engaged, opposed, inflamed, or pacified. The individual disappears. The pattern remains. This is why outrage cycles feel repetitive, because they are. The faces change, the topics change, but the emotional mechanics remain identical. Trigger identity, provoke defense, amplify reaction, monetize attention, repeat. And those caught in the cycle believe they are thinking, but they are reacting. They believe they are choosing, but they are responding. They believe they are resisting, but they are predictable. The psychologically untouchable do not escape society. They move through it without exposure. They do not refuse to think. They refuse to perform. They do not suppress emotion. They refuse to broadcast it. They do not lack beliefs. They refuse to fuse identity with belief. And because of this, they remain difficult to influence, difficult to provoke, difficult to control. This section is not meant to produce anger. Anger would only confirm the mechanism. It is meant to produce clarity, to reveal that emotional exposure is not empowerment. It is accessibility. That outrage is not resistance. It is participation. That being legible to the system is not freedom. It is vulnerability. Modern individuals are not opposed. They are anticipated. Their reactions are modeled before they ever occur. Their outrage is priced. Their attention is harvested. And all of this happens not because they are foolish, but because they are emotionally exposed. The system does not need to break you. It only needs to know you. And society trains you every day. SSHAUN VIABHNIWROFTHUNTO USABL word count 664. There is a certain kind of person who changes the temperature of a room without speaking. They do not raise their voice. They do not rush to explain. They do not compete for attention, and yet tension bends around them. Psychologically untouchable individuals are not defined by what they say, but by what they refuse to give away. They do not argue compulsively, because argument exposes attachment. They do not defend their identity, because identity is not their battlefield. They do not seek consensus, because agreement is not required for control. Where others feel an urgency to respond, they pause. Where others feel provoked, they observe. Where others feel threatened, they remain internally untouched. This silence is often misread. Some interpret it as weakness. Others mistake it for indifference. A few see it as arrogance. But silence in this context is not absence. It is restraint. Intense environments, conflict meetings, negotiations, public confrontations, the calmest individual exerts disproportionate influence, not because they are morally superior or intellectually dominant, but because they are unreadable. Unpredictability destabilizes aggression. When someone cannot determine what you feel, they cannot decide how to move you. This is why detachment alters communication so profoundly. The untouchable speaks less, but with precision. They choose timing over immediacy. They let others reveal themselves first, while emotionally reactive individuals rush to fill silence. Detached individuals allow it to work on others. Silence invites projection, and projection exposes leverage. Decision-making also changes under detachment. Choices are not made to protect ego, reputation, or emotional comfort. They are made based on consequence, trajectory, and long-term positioning. Detached individuals can abandon positions without feeling defeated. They can reverse decisions without feeling humiliated. They can wait without anxiety. This is not passivity. It is efficiency. Energy is conserved because it is not constantly burned in emotional defense. This is why detachment often looks cold to emotionally expressive cultures, because it does not reassure, it does not signal allegiance, it does not perform virtue. Historically, many influential figures operated this way, not as heroes, but as quiet operators. They listened more than they spoke. They allowed rivals to underestimate them. They acted late, but decisively. They were not immune to emotion. They were immune to exposure. This distinction matters. Detached individuals still feel anger, fear, ambition, and desire, but these emotions pass through awareness rather than fusing with identity. As a result, behavior remains deliberate even under pressure. This is why they rarely appear rattled. There is no inner urgency demanding immediate release, no self-image requiring public defense, no emotional hook available for manipulation. Another common misunderstanding must be addressed. Detachment does not mean disengagement from reality. It means engagement without self-betrayal. The untouchable individual can act forcefully when necessary. They can confront, they can assert, they can withdraw, but every action is chosen, not provoked. This makes them difficult to control, and control is always the real objective. Notice how people around such individuals behave. They often talk more, explain more, reveal more. They feel unsettled by the absence of reaction. They attempt to provoke clarity, to force emotional disclosure, to confirm whether their words have landed. But nothing surfaces, and in that absence, power quietly shifts. This section invites observation, not imitation. Once seen, the pattern becomes difficult to unsee. In workplaces, in social circles, in public figures, in conflicts that seem lopsided despite equal intelligence or status, the difference is rarely competence. It is exposure. Those who give away their inner world are easy to reach. Those who do not remain psychologically untouched, and in a world addicted to reaction. Detachment becomes a form of quiet dominance. Sasitiafli is T coast TOFD to Himenenti word count 683. There is a reason psychological untouchability is rare. It is not because it is difficult to understand. It is because it is difficult to endure. Detachment protects the inner world, but it also distances the individual from shared emotional reality. And for most humans, shared emotional reality is where belonging lives. People bond through reaction, through outrage, through agreement, through visible emotional alignment. To step outside of this is to risk misunderstanding. Silence is often interpreted as judgment. Calm is mistaken for coldness. Restraint is confused with lack of care. The detached individual does not echo emotional signals on command, and this breaks an unspoken social contract. Most relationships rely on emotional mirroring. When one person reacts, the other responds. When one is offended, the other validates. When one is outraged, the other joins. Detachment interrupts this rhythm, and interruption creates distance. This is the cost most people cannot tolerate, not isolation, but ambiguity. The discomfort of not being easily categorized, the tension of not being emotionally legible, the risk of being excluded from collective certainty. Machiavelli understood this cost deeply. Power, in his view, was not gained by cruelty, but by relinquishing emotional dependence on approval. To rule effectively, one had to accept misunderstanding. To remain free, one had to accept being unloved at times. Not hated, but not embraced. This is not a glamorous sacrifice. There is no applause for restraint, no reward for silence, no social currency in refusing to react. In fact, the detached individual often feels the opposite. They watch emotional waves move through groups without joining them. They feel the pull of belonging and resist it. They sense the comfort of shared outrage and decline it. Over time, this creates an internal tension. Freedom versus connection, clarity versus comfort, control versus intimacy. Most people resolve this tension unconsciously by choosing comfort. They react not because they are irrational, but because reaction restores connection. They defend identities not because they are fragile, but because identity creates belonging. They expose their inner world, not because they are naive, but because visibility feels like safety. Detachment removes these assurances. It replaces them with solitude, not physical isolation, but psychological independence. And independence is heavy. Without external validation, one must generate internal stability. Without collective emotion, one must regulate alone. Without social reinforcement, one must tolerate doubt. This is why detachment cannot be sustained without self-awareness. It demands emotional literacy, the ability to feel without acting, to observe without merging, to remain open without becoming exposed. This is not something society teaches. It teaches expression, not regulation, reaction, belonging, not autonomy. As a result, detachment often collapses under pressure in moments of stress, rejection, or uncertainty. Even disciplined individuals can revert to emotional exposure. They seek reassurance. They seek alignment. They seek to be seen. There is nothing weak about this. It is human. This section is not an invitation to withdraw from the world. It is a warning against romanticizing untouchability. Detachment is not a permanent state. It is a capacity, a tool that must be chosen consciously and used selectively. Those who attempt to live detached at all times often become brittle, rigid, disconnected. True psychological resilience is not found in permanent distance, but in the ability to step back without disappearing. Machiavelli never suggested detachment for comfort. He suggested it for clarity, and clarity always comes at a cost. The question is not whether detachment is powerful. Siskitio v becoming untoubidhio puentis obecum gichel word count 648. There is a misunderstanding that lingers at the edge of everything discussed so far. That detachment requires hardening. That psychological untouchability demands emotional withdrawal. That to remain unaffected, one must become cold. This is false. Coldness is still a reaction. It is still defined by what it resists. True detachment is not armor. It is space. You do not become untouchable by suppressing feeling, but by loosening identification with it. Thoughts arise. Emotions move. Beliefs shift. But none are allowed to become the center of the self. This distinction changes everything. A person who identifies with anger can be provoked. A person who identifies with belief can be destabilized. A person who identifies with image can be controlled. But a person who observes these states without merging with them remains internally sovereign. This is not a technique. It cannot be performed. It cannot be displayed. The moment detachment becomes something to show, it dissolves. This is why the psychologically untouchable are rarely recognized as such. They do not advertise discipline. They do not perform neutrality. They do not signal superiority. They simply remain internally ungraspable. Machiavelli's true insight was never about manipulation of others. It was about freedom from manipulation. He understood that power moves toward exposure, toward attachment, toward emotional dependency, and that the most dangerous position is not dominance, but independence of inner state. Those who control themselves are the hardest to control, not because they resist influence aggressively, but because there is nothing obvious to seize. This form of mastery does not reject humanity, it deepens it. Detachment allows empathy without entanglement, understanding without agreement, participation without surrender. It allows a person to move through social systems without being consumed by them, to listen without absorbing, to act without being provoked, to care without being captured. This is why detachment must be integrated, not idolized. When practiced without awareness, it becomes isolation. When practiced without compassion, it becomes rigidity. But when held lightly, it becomes clarity. The modern world thrives on immediacy, on reaction, on constant emotional disclosure. In such an environment, silence feels radical, stillness feels suspicious, non-reaction feels threatening, not because it is hostile, but because it is uncontrollable. This documentary does not ask the audience to withdraw from society. It asks them to notice where they have already been entered, where identity has been fused with belief, where emotion has replaced thought, where reaction has replaced choice. Untouchability is not something you acquire. It is something that remains when unnecessary attachments fall away, when you no longer need to be right, when you no longer need to be validated, when you no longer need to be seen reacting. What remains is not emptiness, it is presence, a quiet, unadvertised autonomy. Machiavelli never promised peace. He offered clarity, and clarity rarely comforts. But it frees. This is where the documentary ends, not with instruction, not with resolution, but with space. Because the most dangerous ideas are not those that shout, they are the ones that wait, unreacted to, unclaimed, unexposed, and left to work silently inside the mind.